The black sedan screeches into the narrow alley behind the Coral Crown Hotel, tires screaming against wet pavement like an animal being slaughtered. The passenger door flies open and a man stumbles out, Nicholas Corsetti, 34 years old, broad-shouldered and tall, his tailored white dress shirt soaked black with blood from a gunshot wound to his left shoulder. His dark hair is plastered to his forehead. His face is pale as a corpse. He collapses against the brick wall near the diner's back in trance, sliding down slowly, leaving a red smear on the weathered bricks that catches the weak glow of the broken neon sign above. Blood drips. The sound is small but clear in the silence, drip, drip, drip onto the cracked concrete. Two shadows emerge from the sedan moving like predators through darkness. Rocco and Franco, both 38, both dressed in black suits that cost more than most people's cars, both carrying guns that hang at their sides like extensions of their own bodies. Their faces are carved from stone. Their eyes are scanning the alley for threats, for witnesses, for anything that might endanger the man bleeding out against the wall. They do not notice the scooter engine at first. It comes from the far end of the alley, a small Honda cutting through the summer thunderstorm, the engine a thin whine cutting through the sound of rain hammering against metal and pavement. The headlight swings across the alley in a wide arc and suddenly illuminates everything, Nicholas Corsetti bleeding, Rocco and Franco with their hands on their weapons, the pooling blood spreading across the ground like a dark mirror. Allara Bennett pulls her scooter into the parking lot and kills the engine. She is 29 years old but looks 40 from exhaustion and pain and 8 years of things that should never happen to anyone. Her delivery jacket is thin polyester, soaked completely through from the thunderstorm. Her hair is plastered to her face. She is drenched. Her back burns under her wet shirt where the scars live. 8 years of Douglas Hale's belt have left marks that map every broken promise she made to herself. She told herself she would leave. She told herself she would fight back. She told herself this would not be her life. But here she is. She climbs off her scooter, her legs moving on instinct, her brain still foggy from the double shift at the hotel. 11 hours she worked. 11 hours of carrying plates and smiling at people who treated her like furniture. 11 hours of being invisible. She sees the man collapsed against the wall. For exactly 4 seconds, Allara freezes. This is Miami. This is 3 in the morning. This is exactly how people disappear. This is exactly how women end up as headlines nobody reads. Her survival instinct screams at her, run, get back on the scooter, drive away, forget you saw this. But she moves toward him instead. She rushes to him, her bare feet slipping on the wet pavement because she left her shoes in the parking lot 17 hours ago to save them from the rain. She kneels in the rainwater pooling around his body, her knees hitting cold concrete, and without a word, without even thinking, she strips off her own coat, the only barrier between her scars and the world, and wraps it around his shaking shoulders. Stay with me, she whispers, her voice trembling like a candle in the wind. Stay with me. You're going to be okay. She does not know his name. She does not know who he is. She does not care. She presses her bare hands against the wound in his shoulder, trying to stop the bleeding, feeling the warmth of his blood against her skin. Up close, she can see his face clearly, sharp cheekbones, a scar running from his left eye to his jaw like a blade carved into marble, expensive watch glinting on his left wrist even now as death approaches. His eyes flutter open for a moment and he looks at her through fading consciousness. He sees her drenched hair plastered to her face. He sees her trembling lips. He sees the way she gives everything without asking his name, without asking why, without asking what he could possibly give her in return. Something shifts in his eyes. His mouth moves but no sound comes out at first. Then, so quiet it is almost lost in the rain, Allara. But he loses consciousness before she can answer. 2 shadows move like ghosts across the wet pavement. Rocco and Franco in their black suits, guns drawn, moving with the precision of men who have done this before, who have handled 100 emergencies in 100 alleys. They move toward their boss with the singular focus of wolves protecting their pack. They freeze when they see him cradled by this girl in a wet delivery uniform, this nobody, this invisible person who just sacrificed her only protection from the cold. Rocco's jaw tightens. His hand on his gun relaxes slightly. "Enzo," he says into his phone, his voice deep and solid like an oath. "Boss is down. Shoulder wound. We need medical. Now." Franco kneels beside Allara, his massive frame blocking out the weak light from the neon sign. She does not look up at him. She keeps her hands on Nicholas's shoulder, trying to stop the bleeding, whispering things she does not know he can hear. "What is your name?" Franco asks. "Allara," she says. "Allara Bennett." Franco nods slowly. In 15 years of working for Nicholas Corsetti, he has seen many things. He has seen loyalty. He has seen betrayal. He has seen men cry and men laugh in the face of death. But he has never seen Nicholas Corsetti's eyes move the way they just did when this soap delivery girl said her name. The rain falls harder. An ambulance siren begins to wail somewhere in the distance, getting closer, cutting through the night like a blade wrapped in ice. But what Allara Bennett did not know was that the man bleeding in her arms had been searching for someone exactly like her for 8 months, ever since his daughter Ava disappeared from her school playground and ended up in the Pine Street shelter where Allara volunteers every single Sunday afternoon, braiding hair and reading stories and giving children the one thing they had lost, someone who saw them, someone who cared, someone who did not leave. What she did not know was that Ava had drawn her picture on a piece of yellow construction paper and taped it to the shelter wall. That Ava had asked every volunteer about the delivery girl with sad eyes and kind hands. That Nicholas Corsetti had been tearing Miami apart looking for her, not knowing her name, only knowing that somewhere in this city, there was a woman his daughter loved, and he would move heaven and earth to find her. And now she was kneeling in the rain, giving him her coat. The ambulance turns the corner, its lights painting the alley in alternating red and white, and everything moves very fast after that. Now let us go back. 16 hours earlier. The nightmare started long before the alley, long before the blood, long before Allara Bennett made the choice that changed everything. It started with a number. $200,000. The day shift at the Coral Crown Hotel ended at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Allara stood at the back of the kitchen in her grey server uniform, the name tag that cost $40 she did not have still pinned to her chest, the polyester sticking to her skin from the heat and humidity of Miami in summer. The kitchen smelled like grease and vinegar and the kind of despair that seeps into your bones after 8 years. Douglas Hale stood in his office at the edge of the kitchen, the door open, watching her through the glass partition. He was 53 years old and looked like every bad decision Miami had ever made: overweight, expensive suit, gold rings on both hands, his hair dyed so black it looked painted on. His eyes were the color of dirty water. "Bennett," he called out. "My office. Now." Allara's stomach dropped like someone had cut the rope holding her up. She had seen this look before. She had felt this tone in his voice before. 8 years of working at the Coral Crown Hotel had taught her to recognize the exact moment when Douglas Hale was about to destroy something, and today that something was her. She walked into his office and closed the door behind her. "Sit down," he said. She sat down. Douglas Hale leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. He opened a ledger on his desk, a thick book with pages of numbers, pages of money, pages of the ways he had built his empire on the backs of people like Allara Bennett who had nowhere else to go. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. She did not answer. "This is every tip that went missing from my register in the last 6 months. Every single one. Do you know how much money I found out you stole?" "I didn't steal anything," Allara said. Her voice was steady but her hands were shaking. "I have never taken a penny that wasn't mine." Douglas Hale smiled. It was the smile of a man who knew she was lying even though she was telling the truth, who knew she was helpless even though she was standing up, who knew that whatever he said next would be believed because he had the power and she had nothing. $200,000, he said slowly. "That is the amount you owe me. And I am giving you 7 days to pay it back." 7 days, Allara. "If I do not have that money in my account by next Thursday at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I am going to press charges. I am going to make sure that every hotel in Miami knows you are a thief. I am going to destroy your life so completely that you will wish you had never been born. Allara's throat closed up. $200,000. She made $12 an hour. Before taxes, before the money that was automatically deducted for her living situation at the shelter where she rented a cot in a room with 3 other women, her take-home was less than $300 a week. She did the math in her head even though her brain was screaming at her not to, even though she knew the answer would be a number that meant the end of everything. 72 hours of work at maximum hours would give her $21,000 before taxes. In 7 days, she could work maybe 80 hours if she picked up every shift available, which would give her $24,000 before taxes, which would leave her with approximately $18,000 in her pocket. She was being asked to produce $200,000. The gap was not a number. It was a death sentence. I do not have that kind of money, she whispered. Then I guess you have 7 days to find it, Douglas Hale said. He turned back to his computer, dismissing her, treating her like she was already a ghost. Get out of my office. You are done for the day. Actually, you are done. You are fired. Security will walk you out. Allara stood up on legs that were no longer certain they could hold her weight. She walked out of his office and through the kitchen and past the security guard who was already walking toward her with his hand on his belt. She did not cry. Her tears had dried up somewhere on a Greyhound bus 8 years ago when she arrived in Miami with a black eye and $200 in cash, fleeing from a man who had told her he loved her while his fists told her something different. She took off her name tag as she walked to the parking lot. She held it in her palm, this plastic rectangle that cost $40, and thought about how much $40 used to mean to her. How a week ago, $40 would have changed her life. How now, $40 was nothing. It was less than nothing. It was a rounding error in the $200,000 lie that Douglas Hale had just handed her. She sat on her scooter in the parking lot of the Coral Crown Hotel and counted the money in her pocket. $5. That was all she had in the world. 5 crumpled bills and a pocket full of dreams that had died a long time ago. The sun was going down. The sky was turning from blue to orange to the dark purple color of a fresh bruise. In 7 hours, she would have to start the night shift at the delivery service. In 7 days, Douglas Hale was going to destroy her. But Allara Bennett did not know that in the same moment she was sitting in the parking lot counting $5, across the city in a penthouse office on the 32nd floor, Nicholas Corsetti was sitting with his daughter's drawing in his hands, the yellow construction paper, the crayon picture, the name written in a child's careful letters, Allara. She did not know that he had been asking every person in the Pine Street shelter about her. That he had learned she worked at the Coral Crown Hotel. That he had been planning to approach her, to thank her for seeing his daughter, to offer her a job where she would never have to count $5 again. She did not know that in 6 hours, in an alley behind a hotel, her life was going to change completely. She just sat there on her scooter, holding $5 in her trembling hands, while the rain began to fall and the world around her dissolved into darkness. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps trapped in glass. Allara knelt on the checkered linoleum floor of the Pine Street shelter, her knees pressing into the worn pattern of black and white squares that had faded to gray from 1,000 desperate feet walking across them. The little girl beside her held a pair of shoes, tiny, worn, the leather cracked across the toes from too many miles of running away from things that hurt. Ava Corsetti was 6 years old. She had dark curls that fell past her shoulders and enormous brown eyes that seemed to hold entire lifetimes of sadness. She turned the shoes over in her small hands, examining them like they were made of glass. "Why do you have sad eyes?" Ava asked, not looking up. "Because someone hurt you too." Allara's breath caught. She forced a smile, the kind she had perfected over 8 years of practice, the kind that cost nothing and revealed nothing. "Everyone has stories," she said quietly. "Some of them are sad. That doesn't mean the story is over." She reached out and gently took the shoes, holding them in her lap. They were the first pair of shoes she had ever owned as a child, the memory of that day, the smell of new leather, her mother's smile before everything broke apart. She had kept them all these years, buried at the bottom of her backpack like a prayer that no one answered. Last week, she brought them to the shelter and gave them to Ava without explaining why. Some objects carry too much history to explain in words. Ava leaned against her, small and warm, and Allara wrapped her arm around the child's shoulders. They sat like that for several minutes, neither speaking, just existing in the same pocket of quiet while chaos hummed around them. In the background, children laughed. Volunteers called out names. The fluorescent lights buzzed their endless song of desperation. "I like you," Ava said finally. "I like you too," Allara whispered. She did not know that this child's real name was Ava Corsetti. She did not know that Ava's father was the most dangerous man in Miami, the man who built an empire from blood and vengeance, who ruled over networks of criminals with a hand that was steady and merciless. Ava only ever gave her first name at the shelter. No last names. No family history. Just Ava, age 6, with dark curls and a smile that broke hearts. What Allara did know was that she had been coming to the Pine Street shelter for 3 weeks, volunteering on her 2 days off, and each time she found herself drawn to this one child. There was something in Ava's eyes that recognized her own pain. They were both drowning in the same dark water, just at different depths. Allara brought extra food from the Coral Crown Hotel diner, rolls she saved from dinner service, fruit she stole from the prep station, containers of soup that she poured into bags and hid under her delivery jacket. She read to Ava at night before bed, sitting on the thin mattress in the shelter's dormitory, whispering stories about princesses and dragons and kingdoms where no one went hungry. Ava would fall asleep with her head on Alara's shoulder, and for those few hours, Allara forgot that her own life was dissolving like sugar in rain. The shelter's clock on the wall read 3:13 p.m. Allara had to leave soon. Her shift at the Coral Crown started at 6. She kissed the top of Ava's head, breathing in the scent of cheap shampoo and innocence, and stood up. Her knees ached. Her back ached. Everything ached. Across the city, in a penthouse office on the 32nd floor of the Corsetti building, Nicholas Corsetti held a piece of yellow construction paper in his hands. It was a child's drawing, done in crayon, the lines unsteady and beautiful in that way that only children's art could be. It showed 2 figures, one small with dark curls, one taller with red hair. They were holding hands. Below the figures, someone had written in careful letters, Allara. Nicholas Corsetti was 39 years old. He was 6'2", with broad shoulders built from years of carrying the weight of an empire. His dark hair was beginning to silver at the temples. A scar ran from the corner of his left eye to his cheekbone, a thin white line that had been made by a knife when he was 17 years old, the same night his father died. He wore a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, charcoal gray, tailored to perfection, with an open white shirt showing the gold chain around his neck. His eyes, watching the drawing, were like storm water. Dark. Dangerous. Capable of drowning anyone foolish enough to fall in. "Who is Allara?" he asked the man standing across from him. Marco Tedesco had been with Nicholas for 15 years. He was 53, with silver hair and the careful eyes of someone who had seen too much violence to be shocked by anything anymore. He cleared his throat. "The woman from the shelter, boss. Ava asks about her constantly. She asks every volunteer if they know where Allara is. She draws pictures of her. She sleeps with her hand open, like she's holding someone's hand even in her dreams." Nicholas looked down at the drawing again. He did not speak for a long time. The silence in the penthouse office was so complete you could hear the city's heartbeat 32 stories below, traffic, sirens, the hum of millions of people trying to survive. "Find her," he said finally. "I want to know everything." Back at the Coral Crown Hotel, the diner attached to the lobby was beginning its evening shift. The neon signs flickered to life, diner in red, open in blue, the colors reflecting off the checkered linoleum floor like a kaleidoscope of desperation. The smell of stale coffee hung heavy in the air, mixed with grease from the griddle and the faint chemical scent of industrial cleaner that never quite masked the dirt underneath. Allara changed into her uniform in the employee bathroom at 5:44 p.m. The uniform was a cheap polyester thing in faded blue, with a name tag that said Allara in letters so small most customers had to squint to read it. She looked at her reflection in the mirror and saw a woman of 27 who looked like she was 40. Her eyes were hollow. Her cheekbones were too sharp, the bones of her face pressing against skin that had grown thin from rationing food. Her red hair, which had once been her only beautiful thing, was pulled back so tightly it hurt. She checked her pocket. $5. 5 crumpled bills that represented her entire net worth on Earth. The back room of the diner was empty except for one man. Douglas Hale was 52 years old, with thinning hair that he combed across his scalp in desperate lines, and eyes that were the color of murky water. He wore a manager's shirt, navy blue with a name tag that said Douglas, Assistant Manager. He was waiting by the walk-in freezer, his arms crossed, his posture the kind that men use when they are about to deliver bad news. Allara's stomach dropped. "Allara," he said, his voice smooth and poisonous like oil. "We need to talk." She followed him into the freezer. The cold hit her immediately, stealing her breath, covering her skin in goosebumps. The freezer was lined with metal shelves holding plastic containers of meat and vegetables and prepared sauces. The light was harsh and white. Their breath came out in small clouds. Douglas closed the door behind them. "You've been stealing," he said. "From the register. From the tips. For months, I have records. Detailed records." "That's not true," Allara said. Her voice sounded very small in the freezer's cold. "You know it's not true." Douglas smiled. It was the kind of smile that men give when they have decided to destroy someone and they are enjoying the process of watching that person realize what is coming. $200,000, he said. "That's what you owe. For the tips you skimmed. I have the documentation. If you don't pay me back in 7 days, I'm calling the police. You'll go to prison, Allara. Federal prison. 40 years minimum for embezzlement of this magnitude." Allara's knees nearly buckled. She pressed her back against the freezer wall and felt her old scars scream in response. 8 years ago, she had a boyfriend named Marcus. He had hands like hammers and a rage that he poured out on her body like a storm. The scars from that time ran across her shoulders and back like a map of hell, lines and bruises and fractures that had healed wrong because she was too afraid to go to the hospital. "I never stole anything," she whispered. "You know I didn't. You know that's." 7 days, Douglas interrupted. $200,000. Or you're done. Your life is finished. And nobody will ever hire you again, so don't bother looking. He walked out of the freezer, leaving her alone in the cold. Allara slid down the wall until she was sitting on the freezer floor. The metal was so cold it burned. She pulled out her pocket and counted her money again. $5. Just $5. Even if she worked every single delivery shift for 7 days straight, even if she never slept, never ate, never stopped moving, she might make $800. The math was a nightmare with no waking point. The numbers did not work. They were never meant to work. At 6:15 p.m., a summer thunderstorm began. The rain came down in sheets, black and furious, turning the streets of Miami into rivers. Lightning cracked across the sky like the world was breaking apart. Thunder rumbled so loud you could feel it in your chest. Allara loaded her delivery scooter in the parking lot behind the hotel. Her jacket was so thin she could feel the rain moving through it like fingers. The leather was already soaked. Her hair was plastered to her face. She looked at her scooter, a red 2008 Vespa that had seen better days, with a cracked seat and a taillight held together with duct tape, and she felt something inside her chest break a little more. She had 9 deliveries scheduled for the night shift. Each delivery would pay her between $4 and $8, depending on the distance and whether the customer tipped. Even in the best-case scenario, even if every single person tipped generously, she would make maybe $60. Not even enough to buy a replacement jacket. She drove into the storm at 6:34 p.m., her visibility near zero, the rain so thick she could barely see the street in front of her. The wind was like a blade wrapped in ice. Her hands were numb on the handlebars. Every muscle in her body was shaking. She did not know that 3 blocks away, in the parking lot of a warehouse on 5th Street, a black sedan was skidding to a stop with its tires screaming. She did not know that inside that sedan, Nicholas Corsetti was bleeding from a gunshot wound in his shoulder, his shirt soaked red, his jaw clenched with pain. She did not know that the Moretti family had been waiting in ambush, that they had attacked before his security team could move, that he had managed to escape but barely, that he was losing blood fast and growing colder with every passing second. She did not know that in less than 6 hours, their paths would converge in an alley behind the Coral Crown Hotel, and that the choice she would make in that moment would change both of their lives forever. She just rode through the storm, counting the miles, counting the deliveries, counting down the days until her world ended. The rain fell harder. The rain came down in sheets against the diner windows, each drop racing downward like it was running from something terrible. Allara's delivery jacket hung damp and useless on the back chair, and she wrapped her arms tighter around herself, feeling the cold seep into her bones. The digital clock above the register read 3:22 a.m. Outside, the November wind howled through the empty parking lot behind the Coral Crown Hotel, carrying with it the smell of wet asphalt and dying things. She had 7 more deliveries before dawn. 7 more chances to earn money that would never be enough. The back door of the diner slammed open. A man fell through, bleeding. His white shirt was soaked crimson, his face twisted in pain, and he collapsed hard against the grimy tile floor near the walk-in freezer. Behind him, the sound of a car door slamming, an engine roaring, tires screaming against the asphalt as the black sedan disappeared into the night. Allara froze. Most people would have called 911. Most people would have stepped back, afraid of involvement, afraid of blood, afraid of a stranger's chaos bleeding into their small and fragile life. But Allara was not most people. She had learned long ago that fear was a luxury she could not afford. She moved toward him without thinking. The man was tall, maybe 6'1", with dark hair plastered to his forehead by sweat and rain. A scar ran from his left eye down to his cheekbone like a blade had once tried to split his face in two. His eyes were open, dark as a winter sky, and they fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than everything in her studio apartment combined, a 3-piece Italian cut in charcoal black, now ruined by blood. She knelt beside him without removing her own coat. That would come later, and it would matter more than she could possibly know. "Stay with me," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "I'm going to apply pressure. Don't move." She pressed her palms against the wound in his shoulder, and he flinched but did not cry out. Blood ran warm between her fingers. She had never done this before, had no medical training, no right to believe she could help him, but she pressed anyway because the alternative was watching him die on a diner floor at 3:22 in the morning. The back door burst open again. 2 men in black suits entered, both moving with the lethal grace of people trained in violence. The first one, tall, broad-shouldered, with salt and pepper hair and eyes that had seen terrible things, raised his gun halfway. "Step back. Now." Allara did not move. Her hand stayed pressed against the bleeding wound. "He's dying," she said quietly. "Call an ambulance or help me get pressure on this wound. Choose fast." The second man, younger with sharp features and a gold watch that probably cost $50,000, stared at her like she had spoken in another language. Nobody gave orders to Corsetti's men. Nobody. And certainly not a soaking wet delivery girl with callus on her hands and poverty worn into the lines of her face. The bleeding man's eyes flickered open for 10 seconds, just long enough to focus on her face. Rain ran down her cheeks, mixing with tears she did not even realize she was crying. He saw the purple bruise on her collarbone where Douglas Hale had grabbed her yesterday, squeezing hard enough to leave marks. He saw the thinness of her, the exhaustion, the way she was still trying to save him even though she had nothing to save herself with. His lips moved. "Your name?" "Allara. Allara Bennett. Don't talk. Save your strength." His eyes closed and he was gone again, slipping back into darkness. The first man, Rocco, made a decision in the space of a heartbeat. "Get him in the car." Now. Franco moved without question, grabbing Nicholas under the arms while Rocco carefully lifted his legs. They moved toward the door with practiced efficiency. Franco turned back, Allara's coat in his hands. She had draped it over Nicholas when she first knelt beside him, an instinct more powerful than logic. "Miss, you need this. It's freezing." "He needs it more," she said, already shivering in just her delivery jacket. Rocco paused at the threshold. He was a man who had worked for Nicholas Corsetti for 15 years, a man who had seen him order executions without blinking, who had watched him build an empire on vengeance and blood. He had never seen his boss look at another person the way he looked at this girl. And he had certainly never seen her, a stranger with nothing, refuse to save herself. "You just helped a man who could be anyone," Rocco said, his voice carrying the weight of 30 years of experience in this world. "Criminal. Killer. Why would you do that?" Allara looked at him with exhausted honesty, her hand still stained with another man's blood. "Because 16 hours ago I had $5 to my name and nobody. If I don't help people who have nothing, then what am I?" Rocco absorbed this like a man absorbing a punch to the gut. He nodded once, sharply, then he and Franco were gone. The sedan disappeared into the rain, its taillights vanishing like dying stars. Allara stood alone in the kitchen, arms wrapped around herself, back burning where old scars mapped years of brutality, coat gone, watching the place where the car had been. The wind rattled the diner windows. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. She had no idea she had just saved the most dangerous man in Miami. She had no idea his 7-year-old daughter was the child she had been reading bedtime stories to every Sunday at the Pine Street shelter for the past 4 months. She finished her shift, made $43 in tips from customers too tired or drunk to be stingy, went home to her studio apartment with a broken heater, and collapsed on the mattress on the floor. She had 6 days left to find $200,000. It was an impossible number. A death sentence dressed up in mathematical language. What she did not know was that Nicholas Corsetti woke up at 7:11 a.m. in his private doctor's underground facility, the bullet extracted from his shoulder, his wound cleaned and bandaged with field dressing precision. The moment consciousness returned, the moment his eyes opened and the pain flooded back, the first words from his mouth were not gratitude to Rocco or Franco. They were a question. The girl. In the alley. What was her name? Rocco, standing guard by the bed, answered immediately. Allara Bennett. Delivery driver. Works the night shift at the Coral Crown Diner. Lives alone in a studio apartment on 8th and Pine. She has $5 in her bank account. Something inside Nicholas Corsetti's chest cracked open. It was not a metaphor. It was actual and physical, a sensation like the breaking of ice that had frozen him solid for 17 years, since the night his father was shot in the head during a dinner party, since the moment he understood that love was a weapon people used against you and mercy was a debt you could never repay. He had spent 2 decades building an empire on the understanding that affection was weakness. And then a stranger wrapped her own coat around him at 3:22 in the morning, knowing nothing about him except that he was bleeding and cold and needed help. She had given him her warmth without asking for anything in return. At 9:41 a.m., Mrs. Chen, the director of the Pine Street shelter, received a phone call from a man who would not give his name. His voice was deep and measured, with an accent that carried the weight of old Mediterranean streets. "I am calling about a child in your care," he said. "A girl named Ava. I need to know if she is safe." Mrs. Chen felt her protective instincts flare. "Who is this?" "Someone who has been looking for her for 8 months. Someone who would very much like to know who has been taking care of her while I searched." There was a pause. Then Mrs. Chen understood something in the quality of that voice, something that made her answer carefully. "There is a volunteer. Allara Bennett. She comes every Sunday without fail. She brings Ava books and food and sits with her for hours." Another pause, longer this time. "Thank you," the man said, and hung up. Allara arrived at the Pine Street shelter at 9:38 a.m., exhausted from her night shift, her delivery jacket still damp, her back aching because the bruises from Douglas Hale's grip had turned a deeper purple overnight. She had not slept more than 2 hours. She had not eaten anything since a stale coffee and a piece of toast 14 hours ago. But she came anyway, because Ava would be waiting, and that small girl was the only thing in Allara's life that felt like it belonged entirely to her, like she had actually built something instead of just surviving in the wreckage of other people's cruelty. Ava was waiting in the common room, sitting at a table with crayons and paper spread in front of her. She was 6 years old, with dark hair that tangled easily and eyes the same storm grey as someone Allara was about to meet. When she saw Allara, her whole face transformed. "You came. You came. I drew you another picture." She held up a page covered in crayon marks, 2 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow that stretched across the entire paper in shades of purple and blue and gold. "This is you. And this is me. And we're happy." Allara's throat closed. She knelt down, and Ava threw her small arms around Allara's neck, and for a moment, everything else, the debt, the threat, the impossible choices, fell away. This child had been told her entire life that she did not matter enough to stay, that she was not important enough for anyone to fight for. And Allara knew exactly how that felt. "It's beautiful," Allara whispered. "The most beautiful picture anyone has ever made for me." Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, her expression strange. "Allara, can I speak with you for a moment?" They stepped into the hallway. The shelter smelled like industrial cleaner and children's hope, a scent that never fully covered the underlying sadness of the place. Mrs. Chen kept her voice low. "Someone called this morning asking about Ava. Wouldn't give a name. Just demanded to know if she was safe and who had been taking care of her." Allara felt a jolt of fear. "Did they sound dangerous?" "They sounded desperate," Mrs. Chen said. "And desperate people scare me more than violent ones. Be careful, Allara. Something is happening that you don't understand yet." At 2:51 p.m., a black Mercedes pulled up in front of the Coral Crown Hotel. The diner filled with the smell of burnt coffee and something darker underneath, the smell of money and power and men who did not smile. The radio was playing old jazz, something slow and melancholy, and fluorescent lights buzzed overhead with the sound of dying insects trapped in plastic. 2 men in suits entered first, scanning the room with the methodical efficiency of people trained to identify threats. Regular customers put down their forks. The old man reading the newspaper suddenly became very interested in the sports section. Then Nicholas Corsetti walked in. He was 6'2" and moved like a man who had never been afraid of anything in his entire life. His suit was pristine charcoal wool, tailored so perfectly it looked like it had been drawn onto his body. His dark hair was combed back from his forehead, and the scar on his face caught the fluorescent light, making it seem to glow. But it was his eyes that made people look away. Dark and intelligent and utterly devoid of mercy, they swept across the diner with the casual appraisal of a general surveying a battlefield. He walked straight to Allara. She was wiping down a booth table, the rag moving in automatic circles, her mind somewhere else entirely, on the numbers, always on the numbers, on the way the days were counting down. When she looked up and saw him, recognition crashed into her like a wave. It was him. The bleeding man from the alley. Except now he was standing, and he was not dying, and he was the most dangerous thing she had ever seen in human form. "You," she said. "From last night. Are you okay?" Nicholas studied her with an intensity that made her skin burn. Up close, he could see everything. The exhaustion carved into the lines under her eyes. The fading purple bruise on her collarbone. The way she held her left shoulder slightly higher than her right, protecting an injury. The way her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the rag. All of it told him a story about pain that had nothing to do with the bullet that had torn through his shoulder. "I came to return something," he said, his voice deep and solid like an oath. He nodded to Rocco, who stepped forward with Allara's coat, dry-cleaned and folded with military precision. "And to say thank you." Allara took the coat with shaking hands. The fabric was soft, warmed by sunlight. It smelled like expensive laundry service, like a world completely separate from hers. "You didn't have to," she said quietly. Anyone would have helped." "No," Nicholas said, and his voice carried the weight of 15 years and 1,000 impossible choices. "They would not have." Douglas Hale emerged from the kitchen then, wiping his hands on his apron. He was 53 years old and carried his cruelty the way other men carried cologne, as a distinguishing feature, as armor, as proof of his own importance. When he saw Nicholas Corsetti standing in his diner, his face went the color of old paint. He recognized the name. Everyone in Miami recognized the name. He pasted on a servile smile, the smile of a man about to become useful to power. "Mr. Corsetti. What an honor." "Allara, why didn't you tell me you knew?" "She doesn't know me," Nicholas interrupted, his eyes still on Allara. "Yet." The word hung in the diner like a threat or a promise. Douglas's smile froze. He retreated to the kitchen without another word. Nicholas gestured to the back booth, the one with the ripped vinyl and the sticky table that nobody wanted. Allara followed him, her mind spinning. Rocco and Franco stood guard near the door, creating a zone of privacy in the middle of the diner. Nicholas waited until she sat down across from him, then he spoke. "I need to ask you about the Pine Street shelter." Allara's stomach dropped through the floor. "Why?" "There's a little girl there. 6 years old. Dark hair. Her name is Ava." The world stopped. Allara stared at him, her hands going still on the table. "How do you know Ava?" Nicholas's voice cracked, just barely, and in that crack Allara heard something human struggling to survive inside a man who had been trained to be otherwise. "She's my daughter." The story came out in pieces. 8 months ago, his ex-wife had died in a car accident on the highway. Ava was supposed to go to his sister in Orlando, but the social services paperwork got tangled in bureaucracy, and Ava disappeared into the foster system as a case number, not a name. Nicholas had been searching every shelter, every group home, following every lead his investigators could find, spending $2 million trying to locate a child who had been right here in Miami the entire time, being read to by a delivery girl who had nothing. "And you," he said, leaning forward across the sticky table, his voice barely above a whisper, "have been taking care of her. Mrs. Chen told me everything. You bring her food. You read to her. You gave her a pair of shoes you have kept since you were a child. You drew her pictures. You told her she mattered." Allara's eyes flooded with tears that she did not try to hide. "I didn't know. She never said her last name. She needed someone." "Why?" Nicholas asked, and his voice was soft now, stripped of all threat, carrying only genuine confusion. "Why would you do that for a stranger's child when you have nothing yourself?" Allara looked down at her hands, stained with the work of delivery and survival. "Because I know what it's like when nobody fights for you." The clock on the diner wall ticked. Rain drummed against the windows. In the kitchen, someone was frying eggs, and the smell of butter and salt filled the air. But in the back booth, there was only silence, and in that silence, something was breaking open. Nicholas saw the bruise on her collarbone, saw the way she winced when she shifted position, saw the story written across her body in the language of violence. His jaw tightened. "Who did that to you?" "It's nothing." "It's not nothing." Rocco and Franco exchanged a glance neither had shared in 15 years of service. In all that time, they had never heard their boss use that tone. Gentle. Almost pleading. Like he was asking someone to let him help them, like he actually needed her to say yes. The story came out in pieces, trembling words, and a voice that shattered like glass. Douglas Hale's accusation. The missing tips. The impossible number, $200,000 in 7 days. Allara's voice broke when she said it. "I have 5 days left now. I have $48. He says if I don't pay him, he's calling the police. He'll say I stole from him. I'll go to prison. And Ava, who'll read to Ava if I'm gone?" Nicholas went very still. His hands, which had been resting on the table, clenched into fists. The scar on his face seemed to glow in the fluorescent light. $200,000 in 7 days, he said quietly. That's not a debt. That's a trap. That's a man trying to destroy you systematically, slowly, with purpose. I know, Allara whispered. But I can't prove it. And if I run, he'll hunt me. He knows where I live. He knows where I work. He knows about Ava. Nicholas reached across the table and took her hand. Allara gasped. Not from fear, but from the shock of gentleness. She could not remember the last time someone had touched her without causing pain. His hand was warm and solid, and it was like touching something real in a world that had become mostly shadow. I will handle Douglas Hale, Nicholas said. You will not pay him a single dollar. You will not go to prison. I will make sure of it. Why would you help me? Allara asked, her voice small. I'm nobody. Nicholas leaned closer, and his eyes held hers with an intensity that felt like it could burn through walls. You saved my life. You protected my daughter when I couldn't. You are not nobody. You are the most important person in my daughter's world. That means you are the most important person in mine. At 6:19 p.m. that same evening, the diner door opened. Victoria Ashford entered with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. She was 52 years old and wore her wealth away a weapon, designer handbag, diamond earrings, a Rolex that caught the light whenever she moved her wrist. She saw Nicholas Corsetti immediately, saw him sitting with Allara in the back booth, and her blood ran cold. She approached with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Mr. Corsetti, what a surprise. I'm Victoria Ashford, principal investor in the Coral Crown. I hope Allara is providing adequate service. Nicholas did not stand. Did not smile. Did not acknowledge her existence with anything beyond the briefest glance. Ms. Bennett has provided more than adequate service. In fact, I'm considering a substantial investment in her future. Victoria's smile tightened at the edges, becoming something sharp and dangerous. How generous of you. Though I should mention, there have been some concerns about her conduct. Theft allegations. It would be unfortunate if your reputation were associated with someone of questionable character. These things have a way of spreading. Are you threatening her? Nicholas asked, his voice dropping to absolute zero. Victoria backpedaled, her smile disintegrating. Of course not. Simply informing you of the situation. Then let me inform you of the situation, Nicholas said quietly. You are going to stop spreading lies about Allara Bennett. You are going to stop working with Douglas Hale. And you are going to do it today. If you do not, I will make sure that every crime you have committed, every theft you have orchestrated, every lie you have told is delivered to the federal authorities. And I will make sure it sticks. Victoria's face went white. You can't. I can, Nicholas said. And I will. She left the diner without another word. After she was gone, Allara was shaking. Not from cold this time, but from the shock of having someone actually fight for her, actually stand between her and the people trying to destroy her. She's Douglas's partner, Allara said. She's the one who really runs the tip-skimming operation. But she's wealthy, connected. Nobody will believe me over her. Nicholas reached across the table again, took her hand, and held it like it was the most precious thing he had ever touched. They will, he said. Because I will make them. What Allara did not know was that by midnight, Victoria Ashford would be on the phone with Douglas Hale and 3 other hotel managers, orchestrating a plan to destroy her publicly and completely. They were going to spread accusations across every staff member, every supplier, every contact, creating a web of lies so thorough that even if Nicholas Corsetti tried to help her, Alara's name would be permanently destroyed. What Nicholas did not know yet was that Allara had already written a goodbye letter that night, sitting at her kitchen table at 4:56 a.m., confessing feelings she did not understand and could not afford to have. She was planning to disappear before her debt and danger dragged him and Ava down with her. She sealed the envelope and placed it on her pillow, a small white rectangle containing everything she was afraid to say. Then she turned off the light and waited for dawn. She sits on the edge of her mattress at 1 in the morning, rain hammering against the single window of her studio apartment, and the heater rattles like it's dying. Allara Bennett's hands shake as she pulls out a piece of notebook paper, worn and grey from use. The letter has to be perfect. It has to explain everything without destroying him. She presses the pen to the paper and begins. Nicholas, she writes, each letter careful and small. I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need you to know that meeting you and Ava changed something in me I thought was dead a long time ago. Next to her on the mattress sits a pair of small shoes. Ava's first shoes from the shelter. Allara has kept them for 2 years, a reminder that some lives are worth saving. She touches them once, then continues writing. You asked me why I helped your daughter. The truth is, she helped me. She reminded me that some people are still worth fighting for, even when fighting means everything hurts. The pen moves across the paper like a blade cutting through her own heart. I have feelings for you that I don't have the right to feel. You are extraordinary, Nicholas. You move through the world like you own it because you do. And I'm just a delivery girl with scars on her back and $5 in her pocket. Less than $5 now. $4.37. She pauses. The rain gets louder. Douglas will destroy me tomorrow. Victoria will make sure I can never work in this city again. If I stay, I'll bring all of that down on you and Ava, and I won't do that. I won't. Not to him. Not to her. Not to anyone else I've grown to love. The word love sits on the page like a confession, like a crime. So I'm leaving. Not because I'm weak. Not because I'm running. I'm leaving because for once in my life, I'm protecting someone I love instead of waiting for them to protect me. That's what you taught me, Nicholas. That protection goes both directions. She folds the letter carefully. Her hands are still shaking. She places it in an envelope, writes his name on the front in the same careful handwriting, and sets it on her pillow. Then she stands, pulls on the coat he returned to her, and grabs a backpack holding everything she owns in the world. The bus station is 6 blocks away. She has $48 left. Maybe enough to get to Georgia. Maybe enough to disappear completely. At 1:15 in the morning, Allara steps into the summer thunderstorm. The rain is warm and violent, hammering down like fists, and she walks into it without hesitation. Lightning cracks the sky open directly above her, and for a moment the entire street is white and burning. She walks 3 blocks. Her coat soaks through. Her back burns where the old scars pull tight against her wet shirt, a map of 8 years of pain written into her body. At the corner of 5th and Ocean, she stops. Thunder crashes so loud the ground shakes. And in that moment, standing alone on a wet corner in a dead city, Allara realizes what she's doing. She's running. She's disappearing. She's making herself smaller so she doesn't inconvenience anyone else's life. She's doing exactly what she has always done since the night she was 17 and had nowhere to go. Her knees buckle. She sinks onto the wet curb, rain pouring over her face, and her whole body starts to shake. Not from cold. From the weight of what she's about to lose. Nicholas. Ava. The first people in 8 years who looked at her and saw something worth saving. And she's walking away from them because she's terrified. Because the fear is enormous and suffocating, Douglas's rage, Victoria's power, the $200,000 she will never have, the certainty of destruction coming for her like a flood that cannot be stopped. She's about to stand, to keep walking toward the bus station, when she sees it. A black Mercedes parked across the street. Headlights off. Engine running. The door opens. Nicholas Corsetti steps out into the rain and he's holding her letter in his hand. Behind him, Rocco and Franco emerge like shadows, flanking him, their suits soaked through, their faces stone. Nicholas walks toward her slowly. Water runs down his face. His dark eyes burn like fire. He kneels on the wet pavement in front of her, right there on the street, his $1,000 suit getting destroyed, his shoes getting ruined, and Allara can't breathe. Has anyone ever fought for you the way you fought for my daughter? His voice is deep and solid like an oath. Like a vow being made. Allara can't speak. The words are trapped somewhere in her chest. I read your letter, Nicholas says. He reaches for her shaking hands and holds them. You're not running. Not from this. Not from me. Do you understand? I'll destroy you, she whispers. They'll come after you because of me. They'll. Let them try. His voice doesn't rise. It doesn't need to. Allara, look at me. Look at me. She lifts her eyes to his. I have destroyed men for far less than what they did to you. I have ended careers. I have torn down empires. And none of it took half the courage I saw in you when you wrapped your coat around a stranger at 3 in the morning without knowing who he was or what it would cost you. Rocco steps forward, holding a blanket. Nicholas wraps it around her shoulders and doesn't let go. No one is taking you from me. No one is taking you from Ava. Do you understand? Nicholas, I do. You understand? Yes, she says. Yes. He pulls her close, and for the first time, she lets someone hold her without pulling away. 3 hours later, at 3 in the morning, the Coral Crown Hotel explodes into controlled chaos. 12 agents in FBI windbreakers move through the hallways like ghosts, silent and efficient and unstoppable. They are not Nicholas's men. They are federal law enforcement, and they are executing a warrant secured by Nicholas's lawyers in 4 hours using evidence his investigators gathered over 3 weeks. Financial records. Surveillance footage. Testimony from 47 employees Douglas and Victoria exploited over 8 years. The raid is surgical. Agents storm Douglas Hale's office first. He's sitting at his desk, counting cash, stolen tips, skimmed from his workers, money he was planning to deposit in Victoria's offshore account tomorrow morning. The office door crashes open with a sound like a gunshot. FBI. Hands where we can see them. Douglas jumps to his feet, knocking over his chair, face going purple-red with rage and terror. This is a mistake. I have rights. I'll call my lawyer immediately. You can't just. The lead agent holds up the warrant, and his face is expressionless. Douglas Hale, you're under arrest for wage theft, fraud, extortion, and racketeering. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Douglas collapses to his knees, hands shaking like leaves in a hurricane, begging, please. Please. I'll give the money back. I'll confess everything. Just don't. Too late, the agent says, and they drag him out in handcuffs past the night staff, who watch in stunned silence from the hallway. At 3:47 in the morning, Victoria Ashford wakes to pounding on her penthouse door. She tries to run. She actually tries to flee out the back elevator in her silk robe and diamond earrings, but FBI agents are waiting on the landing. She screams. She struggles. She demands her lawyer. They arrest her in the lobby as early morning hotel guests film on their phones, and within minutes, the footage is everywhere. The video spreads like fire. Wealthy investor Victoria Ashford, face twisted in rage, mouth screaming obscenities, being shoved into an FBI vehicle by 2 female agents. Her hair is loose and tangled. Her robe is falling open. The diamonds on her wrists catch the lobby lights as she rides and fights. By 8 in the morning, every Miami news station is running the clip. By noon, national news. By evening, it's viral, 2 million views, 3 million, 5 million. The fall is public. The humiliation is total. The destruction is complete. Nicholas watches from across the street, standing in the early morning light with Allara beside him, wrapped in a blanket Rocco provided. Her hair is still wet. Her eyes are red from crying, but they're not tears of despair anymore. They're tears of survival. Of release. What happens to them now? She asks quietly. Federal prison, Nicholas says. His voice is cold and certain. 40 years minimum for Douglas. 30 for Victoria. Asset forfeiture. Every dollar they stole, every property they own, seized by the government. Public trial. Their names destroyed in every industry they ever worked in. They'll spend the next 4 decades watching their empires crumble from a cell, watching their wealth disappear, watching the world move on without them. Not death. Allara whispers. Death is too quick, Nicholas says. Too easy. Too merciful. They took 8 years of your life. They took your sleep. Your peace. Your dignity. Death would be a mercy they don't deserve. This way, they suffer every single day. This way, they remember what they did. Allara watches the FBI cars disappear into the grey morning light, and she realizes something shifting inside her chest. For the first time in 8 years, she is free. Not safe. Freedom and safety are different things, but free. The weight that has been crushing her since she was 17 years old is gone. What she doesn't know yet is that Nicholas's team has uncovered additional evidence proving the $200,000 accusation was completely fabricated using doctored receipts. Douglas created the entire debt as a cover for his own theft. And that evidence will exonerate her completely, delivered by morning, removing every stain from her name. What Nicholas doesn't know yet is that his daughter Ava has been asking Mrs. Chen every single day when the delivery girl with kind hands will visit again. And that Ava has been planning a surprise thank you gift in secret, a drawing done in careful crayon of Allara and Nicholas holding Ava's hands under a rainbow, labeled in the child's careful letters, "My new family." The rain has stopped. The sky is clearing. Somewhere in the distance, a bus horn sounds, lonely and fading. But Allara isn't catching that bus anymore. 3 days after the FBI vans disappeared into the grey Miami morning, Allara Bennett stood in the doorway of the Pine Street shelter, her hands trembling like leaves in November wind. She wore a cream-colored dress that Nicholas had insisted on buying her, soft cotton, simple, nothing like the delivery jacket she'd worn for 8 years. The fabric felt foreign against her skin, like armor she hadn't earned yet. Mrs. Chen, the shelter director, stood behind the front desk sorting donation papers when she looked up and her entire face transformed. "Allara! You came back." "I said I would," Allara whispered. But before Mrs. Chen could respond, before either woman could take another breath, small feet thundered down the hallway like rain against pavement. Ava Corsetti, 5 years old, with her father's dark eyes and an innocence that still believed in second chances, crashed directly into Allara's legs with the force of a child who had been counting days. "You came back. You came back. Daddy said you would come back, but I was scared and scared and scared." The words tumbled out in a waterfall, each one more desperate than the last. Allara knelt down, her knees hitting the cold tile floor, and pulled the child into her chest. She breathed in the smell of strawberry shampoo and something sweeter underneath, hope, maybe, or the particular scent of a child who hadn't yet learned that the world breaks promises. "I'll always come back for you," Allara said, and her voice cracked like old ice. "Always. That's a promise I'm keeping." Ava's small arms wrapped around Allara's neck so tightly she could barely breathe, and Allara realized in that moment that this child had been waiting. Not for a delivery girl. For a mother. The word hung in the air between them, unspoken but understood. Nicholas appeared in the doorway then, backlit by the afternoon sun streaming through the windows. He wore a black suit, Armani, tailored to fit his shoulders like a second skin, but his tie was undone, loose around his neck. His dark eyes found Allara immediately, as if she were a magnetic pull he could no longer resist. In 15 years of building his empire on silence and violence, he had never let anyone see him like this. Vulnerable. Open. Waiting. Mrs. Chen approached him with a clipboard, her professional mask sliding into place. "The paperwork is finalized, Mr. Corsetti. Ava can transition to your care today. The social worker has cleared the adoption. She's yours." Nicholas nodded once, formal, but his eyes never left Allara. She was kneeling on the shelter floor in a cream-colored dress, holding his daughter like she was made of glass, and something in his chest, something cold and dangerous and long-sealed, cracked open like a door he'd welded shut 23 years ago. "There's one more thing I need to ask," he said quietly. The air shifted. Even Ava felt it, pulling back from Allara slightly, watching her father's face the way children do when they sense adults are about to say something that changes the shape of the world. 40 minutes later, the black Mercedes sat idling in the shelter parking lot, engine purring like a caged animal. Rocco and Franco stood by the rear passenger door, their shoulders broad enough to block the afternoon light, their dark suits identical enough to look like a uniform. They were not men who asked questions. They were men who solved problems with the same precision others used to tie their shoes. Nicholas handed Allara an envelope. The paper felt thick between her fingers, expensive, the kind of envelope that usually contained threat or triumph. Her hands were shaking. "What's this?" she asked, though her voice had already guessed the answer. "Evidence clearing your name. Every document Douglas Hale fabricated. The receipts he doctored. The $200,000 debt he created to control you." Nicholas stepped closer, and she could smell his cologne, expensive, sharp, like winter on the skin. "Proof that you owe nothing. Your record is clean. You're free." Allara opened the envelope with trembling fingers. The documents blurred through tears she hadn't noticed falling. Legal seals. Official stamps. Words like exoneration and complete vindication swimming across the page like fish in dark water. "How did you?" "I told you. Nobody threatens what's mine." He said it like a fact of nature, like the sun rising or rain falling. Then, quieter, "Not yet. But I'm hoping you will be." Ava tugged on Alara's hand with the specific urgency only a 5-year-old possessed. "Daddy says you can live with us. In the big house. And I can show you my room and we can read stories every night and you can braid my hair like Mrs. Chen does. Please? Please?" Allara looked at Nicholas, and what she saw terrified her more than any threat ever could. She saw a man who had built an empire on vengeance and silence, now standing in a parking lot asking a question with his entire body. She saw someone choosing mercy. Choosing her. "I can't just move into your life," Allara said. Her voice sounded very small, very far away. "I'm a delivery girl." "You?" A man who watched his father bleed out on a winter street when he was 17, Nicholas interrupted. Each word was measured, precise, like he'd been saving them for this exact moment. Who spent 23 years building something powerful enough to hurt the people who hurt him? Until a woman with $5 in her pocket and a coat held together by threads gave away the only thing keeping her warm to a stranger bleeding in an alley. His jaw tightened. His hands clenched into fists, then deliberately opened, palms facing outward like he was showing her he carried no weapons. "You saved my life. Not because you were paid. Not because you knew who I was. But because mercy still lives inside you after 8 years of someone trying to destroy it." His voice cracked, an audible break, like glass meeting concrete. "Let me fight for you now. Let me give you the life you deserve. Let me see you the way you've been invisible to everyone else." Rocco and Franco both looked away, suddenly very interested in the parking lot's far corner. Neither man had ever witnessed their boss show emotion. In 15 years, they had built their lives around his control, his absolute dominance over every feeling. This vulnerability was more unsettling than any rage. Allara was crying fully now, tears streaming down her face, her chest heaving. "I have scars. On my back. From 8 years ago. From him. They're ugly and I never told anyone and I'm..." Nicholas stepped forward and gently took her face in his hands. His palms were warm. His eyes were storm gray and completely still. "Scars mean you survived. Show them to me when you're ready. Until then, know that I see all of you. The strength. The sacrifice. The light you carry like a candle in a dark house. And I am asking you to stay." Ava wrapped both her small arms around Alara's leg, her voice small and certain. "Please stay. You make Daddy smile. He never smiles." 3 words. A child's simple observation that contained everything Nicholas had lost and everything he was desperate to reclaim. Allara looked at this man, this child, this impossible second chance. She thought about the $5. The coat. The years of invisibility. She thought about how Mercy had saved them both. She nodded. Okay. I'll stay. 1 week later, the diner's kitchen smelled like every shift Allara had ever worked: grease, burned coffee, the ghost of 10,000 unappreciated meals. She wore her delivery jacket one final time, though now it felt like a costume from someone else's life. A different girl had worn this uniform. A girl who counted every penny. A girl who was invisible. The new manager, hired after Douglas Hale's arrest and Victoria Ashford's humiliation, approached her with an envelope. His face was careful, respectful. The entire restaurant knew her story now. The girl who saved the Mafia boss. The girl who was free. Your final paycheck, he said. Plus restitution from the investigation. $47,000 in stolen tips we recovered from Douglas's accounts. It's yours. Allara stared at the check. $47,000. More than she'd made in 2 years. More than she'd ever thought she'd hold in her hands. The number seemed impossible, like a dream someone else had dreamed. She thought about the $5 she'd had in her pocket that night in the alley. She thought about the coat she'd given without hesitation. She handed the check back. Divide it among the other staff. The one still here. The one still fighting. They need it more than I do. The manager blinked. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Are you sure? I'm sure. Outside, the Mercedes idled at the curb, engine humming like a heartbeat. Nicholas sat in the driver's seat, watching her through the window. Ava bounced in the back seat, waving both hands, grinning like the sun had learned to smile. Allara pulled off her delivery jacket for the last time and walked toward that car, toward that man, toward that child. The November wind caught her hair, but it didn't burn anymore. She climbed into the passenger seat, and Nicholas reached over without a word and held her hand. Welcome home, he said. 6 months later, the Miami skyline burned orange and gold as evening descended on Nicholas's estate. Allara sat on the veranda overlooking the city, wearing a dress of deep blue silk that moved like water. Her scars remained beneath the fabric, 8 years of marks, of proof, but they no longer defined her. Nicholas had seen them. Had traced them with his fingers like he was learning a language made of her survival. Had kissed each one like a prayer. Inside, Ava sat with her tutor, her tongue poking out as she concentrated on fractions. The girl who had been waiting in a shelter was becoming something new. Someone safe. Someone who would grow up believing she was worthy of being fought for. Nicholas joined her on the veranda, wine glasses in hand. He settled into the chair beside her, his suit jacket unbuttoned, his face softer than it had any right to be for a man who had spent his life building empire through fear. What are you thinking about? He asked. The night in the alley. When I gave you my coat. You gave me more than a coat. His voice was deep and solid like an oath. You gave me back the part of myself I thought was dead. You gave me hope. Allara smiled. For the first time in 8 years, the smile reached all the way to her eyes. I went back to the Pine Street shelter today. I'm funding a new wing. For children like Ava. So they never feel invisible. Nicholas turned to face her completely. That's who you are. The woman who sees people everyone else ignores. I learned it from you. You saw me when I was nobody. You were never nobody, he said, and he meant it so completely that the words changed the air between them. The door burst open and Ava thundered outside, holding a framed drawing. Crayons on paper, a man, a woman, a child holding hands beneath a rainbow. In careful block letters at the bottom, MY New Family. She had made it 6 months ago, in secret, at the shelter. Waiting. Believing. Knowing somehow that hope was coming. Allara pulled her close, kissed her forehead. Nicholas wrapped his arms around both of them, and for the first time in his life, he felt what peace actually meant. Not the absence of enemies. Not the silence of a conquered empire. But this. A girl with kind hands and a daughter with a future and the knowledge that mercy had saved them all. Sometimes the people who seem invisible carry the greatest light. Kindness is not weakness. Mercy is not foolishness. And sometimes the smallest act of compassion can change the trajectory of two lives forever. Allara gave everything when she had nothing. And in return, she received everything she never knew she needed. Love. Family. Freedom. The knowledge that she was always worthy of being seen. If this story moved you, drop a like right now. Share it with someone who needs to remember that their kindness matters, even when the world tries to convince them otherwise. Subscribe and hit the bell because tomorrow we have another story that will remind you why compassion is the greatest power we possess. Comment below, have you ever helped a stranger without knowing how much it would change your life? Tell us your story. We read every single comment. Thank you for watching. Remember, you are never invisible. Your light matters. See you tomorrow.